Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. The Curse of Oak Island. Disaster in the Money Pit area as a great flood hits the garden shaft. The Curse of Oak Island team found themselves battling nature and a possible flood tunnel booby trap as the garden shaft project hit a massive hurdle. Also, the guys learned wood has been detected in Aladdin's cave, suggesting more evidence of human-made structures in the underground cavern. Last night's show was episode 7 of season 11, named The Great Flood, and the moniker was not meant to be ironic. A once-in-a-generation storm battered Oak Island and Nova Scotia, causing widespread destruction across the province and leaving the garden shaft with 30 feet of water. Before the storm, Dumas Mining Lit representative Roger Fortin took Marty and Rick Legina down the garden shaft to give an update on the miners' progress. They had increased the shaft depth from about 82 feet to 87 feet. Water was constantly dripping down the shaft, but Roger seemed very confident they could stop the flow using an expanding foam. However, after the storm hit, the team found the garden shaft full of water. The storm obviously contributed to the flooding, but Roger could not understand where the water was coming from. Oak Island team suspect they've hit a flood tunnel at the garden shaft. The shaft was bone dry last year, so why was there now 30 feet of water? The guys speculated that maybe going the extra depth meant they had hit a flood tunnel. These ancient booby traps, known as flood tunnels, were first encountered by the Onslow Company in the 19th century and are thought to release a torrent of water when breached at a depth of about 90 feet. The guys don't know if they've hit one of these flood tunnels, but it's massively frustrating. The excavation will now be put on hold for an indeterminate time while the Dumas crew works on figuring out where the water came from and how to stop it. On a positive note, if they have hit a flood tunnel/booby trap, it could mean they are close to finding something important. Discovering wood at Aladdin's cave indicates human structures. Elsewhere, Dr. Ian Spooner and his colleagues, Dr. Matt Lukeman and Dr. Fred Mickles, were back in the war room with another round of data from their water testing. These guys have been uncovering traces of gold and silver in the water buried under the Money Pit area, and Matt has expanded the research to include organic materials, such as wood. Matt told the team that he'd found traces of wood in the water of Aladdin's cave, the cavern the guys have been probing at about 150 to 160 feet below the Money Pit area. Ian explained that there was no natural reason for wood to be found there, so its presence likely indicated human-made structures were placed down there. The guys have been trying to ascertain if the cavern is natural or human-made, and so far they've been unable to find conclusive evidence either way. Last night they'd put another high-definition camera down into the cavern, and there was great excitement when they spotted what looked like a metal bolt. Unfortunately, so much sediment was floating about that it was hard to get a clear image. Most of the guys were enthusiastic about the images, but there was evident disappointment etched on Marty's face, as he had likely been hoping to see actual treasure. This was a frustrating episode for the Fellowship of the Dig, as multiple problems seemingly hampered them. Don't expect them to give up anytime soon though, they will keep striving. The sky over Oak Island had an ominous heaviness, a brooding darkness that hung low like a shroud of ill omen. For centuries, treasure hunters had dug relentlessly into its depths, seduced by the island's whispered legends of buried riches. Among these was the infamous Money Pit, a cursed enigma that had claimed fortunes, lives, and sanity. But it was the garden shaft, a recently revitalized tunnel in the heart of the island, that would bear the brunt of the disaster to come. That morning, a bitter wind whipped across the island, tugging at the trees as storm clouds gathered, swirling like a cauldron of malevolent spirits. The research team working the shaft knew bad weather was coming, but they had no inkling of what was brewing beneath the surface, something far more sinister than mere rain. The garden shaft had become a focal point of the treasure hunt. Recent excavations had unearthed tantalizing clues, traces of gold, a shard of ancient pottery, cryptic markings that hinted at secrets locked deep below. Spirits were high, despite the looming storm, as the crew buzzed with the anticipation of a breakthrough. But hidden within the earth, ancient mechanisms stirred like the grinding gears of a forgotten curse. As the sky cracked open and rain began to fall, there was an unnatural stillness, a moment when time seemed to hold its breath. Then the deluge began in earnest. Fat raindrops lashed the island, turning paths into streams and excavations into muddy quagmires. The wind howled like a chorus of the damned, shrieking through the trees and rattling loose boards on the crew's equipment sheds. The garden shaft, a vertical tunnel fortified with timbers and iron supports, was not immune to the assault. The ground, already weakened from centuries of digging, began to shift under the relentless weight of water. As the rain intensified, it wasn't just surface runoff that posed a threat. Deep underground, the island's natural flood tunnels, a system of booby traps designed by whoever first constructed the money pit, began to awaken. These tunnels had long been the bane of treasure seekers. Carved by unknown hands, they were designed to draw seawater from nearby coves into the heart of the island whenever a certain depth was breached. For generations, they had thwarted every attempt to reach the supposed treasure, drowning the shafts in briny water. And now, as if some ancient guardian had sensed the proximity of intruders, these hidden arteries began to pulse with life. Suddenly, within the depths of the garden shaft, there was a deep, resonant groan, like the death knell of an ancient beast. The wooden supports buckled, splintering under the pressure as water began to seep through the walls. The crew scrambled, shouting orders, but their voices were drowned out by the roar of the downpour. The water wasn't just coming from above, it was rising from below. In the control room, panic took hold. Monitors flickered with images of the shaft's interior, where muddy torrents were surging up from cracks in the floor. The old flood tunnels had been breached. Seawater, driven by some ancient hydraulic mechanism, was pouring into the shaft, mingling with the rain and soil in a frothing, deadly slurry. The alarm blared, a piercing, urgent sound, warning the crew to evacuate. But it was too late. With a deafening crack, the central shaft collapsed inward, sending a plume of debris and water shooting up into the air like the geyser of a wounded earth. Men tumbled and slid, clawing at the slick ground as they fought to escape the cascading mudslide. Shouts of terror mingled with the howling wind as machinery was swallowed by the churning flood. Outside, as the storm raged on, the island itself seemed to shift and groan, as if the ground was in revolt. Trees toppled, roots pulled from the earth as unseen forces beneath twisted the land. The great flood that now ravaged the garden shaft was no mere natural disaster, it was the island's curse reasserting itself, a calculated defense against those who dared to uncover its secrets. Water rushed into the surrounding excavation sites, flooding trenches and tunnels. The excavation equipment was submerged, powerless against the torrent. The surge carried debris, old timbers, shattered crates, and even relics of past expeditions, churning them in a deadly whirlpool. It was as if the very island had opened its maw to swallow all evidence of humanity's trespass. Back at the money pit, where the legend had first taken root centuries ago, water bubbled up through old breaches, washing away recent dig efforts. The pit had become a mirror, reflecting the storm-tossed sky as waves lapped at its edges. For a moment, amidst the chaos, it seemed as though the island was reclaiming itself, pulling everything back into its depths.